When we say the American dream is dead, I think that what most people mean is that there are now obstacles to the American dream that prevent them from achieving their aspirations. But if the American dream is dying, it's because we have ceased to dream. It's because people have decided that the dream itself is stupid, that the reason that they are failing is not because of their own failures. They're failing because the society around them is failing. That's incredibly dangerous. It's an incredibly dangerous idea. And it does, in fact, kill the American dream. There's nothing new particularly about these sorts of conspiracy theories. There's a famous philosopher named Karl Popper. He wrote an amazing book called The Open Society and Its Enemies, big bestseller back in the 1940s. He's most famous as an empiricist. His basic theory is that you can't prove theories true as much as you can falsify them. Right? That through falsification, we can sort of by process of elimination tell what's false, and then what remains is what's true. That was Karl Popper's basic theory when it came to scientific knowledge. He opposed what he called inductive reasoning, that you reason to a point from the prior evidence. Instead, he said you have tests, and you test the theory over and over and over, empirical testing of theories. Okay, but he wrote in this book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, about what he called the conspiracy theory of society. And here's what he wrote. He said the conspiracy theory of society is, quote, the view that an explanation of a social phenomenon consists in the discovery of the men or groups who are interested in the occurrence of this phenomenon. Sometimes it's a hidden interest which has to first be revealed, and who have planned and conspired to bring it about. So what he says is most of the societal forces that are around us are evolutionarily created. That when there's a problem in society, usually that has been built up over the course of generations gradually and very often not on purpose. That the unintended consequences of human action typically are the things that build up systems. It's usually not some group of men in a room somewhere who are figuring out how all the levers of society work. Why does that make a difference? Because once you start attributing everything around you to a conspiratorial group of people in the back room who are trying to figure out how to screw you, things get very ugly very quickly. $20 barely gets you anything these days. You can't even fill your gas tank or get a burger and fries for less than $20. But do you know what $20 will get you? From the cell phone company I use, Pure Talk, you can get unlimited talk, text, and plenty of 5G data for just $20 a month. Pure Talk gives you the same quality of service as your current cell phone provider, but for about half the cost. The average family saves almost $1,000 a year, all with no contracts and no activation fees. You can switch to Pure Talk and keep the phone and phone number you currently use, or you can take advantage of their great deals on the latest iPhones and Androids. Making the switch is incredibly easy. Their U.S. customer service team can help you join Pure Talk in as little as 10 minutes. Choose to spend your hard-earned money with a wireless company that shares your values, supports our military and veterans, creates American jobs, and refuses to advertise on, the fake news networks. Stop spending a ridiculous amount of money on your phone plan. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Right now, my listeners can get an additional 50% off their very first month of coverage. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro. Again, puretalk.com/Shapiro. Go check them out right now. puretalk.com/Shapiro. He says this view, this conspiratorial view of society, arises, quote, from the mistaken theory that whatever happens in society, especially happenings such as war, unemployment, poverty, shortages, which people as a rule dislike, is the result of direct design by some powerful individuals and groups. This theory is widely held. In its modern forms, it is a typical result of the secularization of a religious superstition. The belief in the Homeric gods, whose conspiracies explain the history of the Trojan War, is gone. The gods are abandoned, but their place is filled by powerful men or groups, sinister pressure groups whose wickedness is responsible for all the evils we suffer from, such as the learned elders of Zion, or the monopolists, or the capitalists, or the imperialists. And so what he's pointing out here is that if you go back to pagan cultures basically suggested that all the ills that you were suffering were the result of a series of gods who were conspiring against you. And when you read the Iliad, this is what you see. See people who are making independent human decisions, but those decisions are constantly thwarted by a group of people in the sky, you might call it a conspiracy theory, who are figuring out how your life actually is supposed to work. Monotheistic religion, on the other hand, actually fights against conspiracy theories. Why? Because monotheistic religion says there is one God, and that one God is in charge of the universe, and that one God created a good universe. That God is good, his universe is good. And that means that if you are suffering a problem, the first place you should look is not to the gods or to the universe. The first place you should look is to you. That's what the Bible is predominantly about. Adam is placed in the Garden of Eden. It is a Garden of Eden. It is an amazing place. And he is placed there to cultivate the garden. And it is his failures that lead to his banishment from the Garden of Eden. Not God's evil, not the gods conspiring against Adam. Adam's own failures lead to him being expelled from the Garden of Eden. It's why the stories of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel are literally the most important stories in human history. Because those particular stories explain all of human history. Because what do human beings do once they are expelled from the Garden of Eden? They start blaming conspiracy theories. Cain looks at Abel and he says, it's not fair that Abel's sacrifice was accepted by God, but mine was not. Must be some sort of unfair thing happening, and he kills Abel. Even though God explicitly warns him, maybe you should look at your own actions. Sin crouches at your door. Instead, you might want to look internally and try to figure it out. And actually, the lesson of Cain and Abel is that Cain eventually does that. He repents and then he goes and builds cities. But that is what monotheistic religion did. Monotheistic religion said, God is good. The universe he created is good. If there is a problem in your life, there's like a 98% shot that you should do something about it. Doesn't mean there aren't problems that are created by other people. And we should all find those problems created by other people. And we should fight those problems created by people. But there has to be evidence. We have to find pathways of fixing those problems. But if there's something going wrong in your life, the first place you should look before you look to quote unquote vague systems, before you go ghost hunting, you should look at you. Then monotheistic religion declines. And in its place, you don't get pagan gods. You get a new form of paganism, which is the conspiracy theory. So here's what Papa writes. He says, I do not wish to imply that conspiracies never happen. On the contrary, they are typical social phenomena. They become important, for example, whenever people who believe in the conspiracy theory get into power. People who sincerely believe that they know how to make heaven on earth are most likely to adopt the conspiracy theory and to get involved in a counter-conspiracy against non-existing conspirators. For the only explanation of their failure to produce their heaven is the evil intention of the devil, who has a vested interest in hell. You see this on all sides of the political aisle. The only thing that stands between us and a greater world is if I can just get those group of people and I need the power in order to do that. And the reason I need the power is because they are involved in a conspiracy against me. Give me the power and I will fix this thing. When the reality is that the vast majority of problems are solvable in a free country like the United States, the freest country in the history of the world, the most prosperous country in the history of the world, because it is the freest country. Those problems are mostly solvable at a personal level. But again, politics, instead of finding discrete problems and solving discrete problems, has become about how do we blame the society around us for our own personal failings. By the way, when it comes to monotheistic religion, the reason Marxists hate monotheistic religion is because it debunks the conspiracy theory. Marxists hate monotheistic religion. This is the reason why the communists tried to kill the church, because the idea was that a monotheistic religion says God is good, the universe is good. If you're failing, you might want to look at you. Marxism says if you're failing, it's because society created a system that makes you fail, and we need to rip down that system. This is why Marx suggested that religion was the opiate of the masses. So Papa writes even further. He says, what was one of the chief factors leading to the exacerbation of conspiracy theory of society? Why has this become so prevalent? He's writing this in the 40s. He says the big problem is what he called discretionary powers, designed to empower organs of the state to act within certain limits as they consider necessary for achieving the ends laid down by the rulers for the time being. So centralization of power turns into, we need to act against the conspiracy. And we can't go through any sort of predictable process. We can't go through any legalistic process because it might get thwarted. We need to solve the problem fast. And the best way to do that, more centralized power in the hands of an unanswerable few. He writes, the use of discretionary powers is liable to grow quickly once it has become an accepted method, since adjustments to discretionary short-term decisions can hardly be carried out by institutional means. You're going to have to move too fast. You can't go through like a legislature. You can't go through a budgetary process. You need to have an administrative state that can move quickly, and it needs to be able to do things at a moment's notice. And it doesn't have to make its excuses to you, because after all, there's a conspiracy afoot, and that conspiracy can only be thwarted by centralized collective power through discretionary means. He says this tendency must greatly increase the irrationality of the system, creating in many the impression that there are actually hidden powers behind the scenes, making them susceptible to the conspiracy theory of society with all of its consequences, heresy hunts, national, social, and class hostility. So you give the government a lot of power, you centralize power, and then you use that centralized power in order to push discretionary power, and then discretionary power, because it doesn't look predictable, because it doesn't look rational. That breeds more conspiracy theories, because now you actually do have small groups of people in shady rooms making decisions for all of society. And so now we are in a death spiral, a conspiracy theory death spiral that ends with the belief by the vast majority of Americans that they are now victims in the society. And once Americans believe that they are victims of societal institutions around them, and that freedom is not the answer, individual freedom is not the answer, collective power is the answer, that's the end of the American dream. It's totally dead. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.